What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another video. So today we're going to continue chipping away at the cinnamon colored interior swap in my F10 by finally swapping out the front seats. In this video I'll show you the tools you'll need, the process I took to be able to swap the front seats out, and later on in the video I'll share some tips and words of advice if you're considering doing this swap yourself. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, let's dive into it. Now the only tools you'll actually need in order to do this job is a 10mm socket and ratchet in order to remove the negative battery cable, as well as a T50 Torx socket and ratchet in order to remove the 4 bolts that mount the seat to the car. Now I used a couple of extra tools just to make the job a little quicker and easier for myself. They're by no means necessary, but you can definitely get the job done with just the 10mm socket and ratchet and the T50 Torx socket and ratchet. Alrighty, so the first thing you need to do to be able to remove your seats out of your F10 before disconnecting the battery is we're gonna move the seat forward and backwards to be able to access these bolts down here, because if you disconnect the battery then you can no longer move these seats and then you can't get the bolts out. So the first thing you do is, I like to start at the front here, is scoot the seat all the way back to make room for the T50 bolts, and then break them loose and then remove them, and then we're going to scoot the seat all the way forward, remove the rear bolts, and then center the seat and kind of make it as small as possible. So scoot it down and lean the backrest up, and then we can then disconnect the battery and pull the seat out. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these bolts, and then I'll show you guys removing the rear bolts, and then we'll disconnect the battery and start ripping the seat out. Alright, so all 4 bolts are officially out of the car, so the seat is no longer being held in. But there's one thing I wanted to go over real quick. You have to remove this seat belt as it's bolted to the underside of the seat right here. That's why I have my iPhone right here showing you guys. Let me see if I can get a good shot. If you look right there, this bolt right here, that's the bolt that holds the seat belt to the seat. You can't really pull the seat out while that's attached. And luckily, it's a T50 as well. It's pretty easy to get to. There's a lot of room. So once you get all the bolts out, just scoot the seat back just enough to be able to access this bolt. Once that's out, you could just pull the seat belt up and out of the seat in between the plastic panel here. And then we are ready to yank the seat out. So here we go. Alright, once you get everything unbolted and you're ready to pull the seat out, that's when you want to disconnect the negative terminal. So I already have mine loose. I'm just going to come here and yank it out. I'm going to just get it out of the way. You don't want it to make any contact with any metal or anything. Sometimes I like to just put a rag and rest it so it doesn't risk touching anything. And then at this point you can disconnect the connector under the seat down here. That big yellow one that you can't see because it's too dark, and that one right there, and then you can pull the seat out. So here we go. Now that the seat is out of the car and the car's all vacuumed up, we can hop into some of the more boring technical stuff. If you're not into that, you're not into a bunch of the talking and explaining, I'll put a timestamp at the bottom here, but basically, I come from a long line of 90s BMWs. I've owned several E36s, and over the years of owning those cars, I learned that most things on those cars are pretty swappable. The interiors, the seats, everything. Like, the biggest thing you had to worry about on those cars was whether or not it was a coupe or a sedan. And unfortunately, I went into this F10 project. This is my first, like, newer BMW. I went into this project kind of with the same mindset. And since then, basically, every single project I've tried to do has in some way or another given me problems because things are not quite as swappable as on the old cars. And the reason being is because all of these newer BMWs have just so many trim levels and little options that you can get. And with that comes all these different modules and different wiring setups. And so not everything is quite as swappable as the old cars. And so the mistake I made this time around, just like all the other videos, if you're wondering at all at this point in the video why we haven't started with the driver's seat and why the driver's seat is already installed, it's because yesterday it kind of occurred to me before trying to film this video that maybe I should figure out how to do this. Maybe there's something I should know before hopping in. Maybe I might run into some issues. And sure enough, I found out that there are quite a few different options for the F10 seats. Some of them come with a AC like cooled function. Some of them come with massage functions. Some are just standard manual seats. And so I didn't want to film anything yesterday and get halfway through this project and realize that I couldn't even swap in the seat. And I didn't also want to swap the seat in and have any lights come on, any fault codes. And so I kind of troubleshooted a little bit yesterday and figured out how I could swap the front seats in without setting any fault codes. At least with that seat in, there are no fault codes so far. But with that, I'm going to show you guys what I found, what I looked for, and what I ended up doing to be able to avoid having to code in a seat or have any fault codes because you are trying to swap in a seat with different functions than your OEM seats. And so hopefully learn from my mistakes, do a little more research before you hop into any project. That's the word of caution I was talking about in the beginning of the video and why I didn't end up filming any of the install of the driver's seat and why we're doing the passenger seat instead. I'm taking what I learned yesterday, applying it today, and now telling you guys. So with that, I'm going to show you guys what I'm talking about, and hopefully you guys can avoid any potential faults or mistakes. So here we have both of the seats out of the car, so I can show you what I learned yesterday while doing the driver's seat. Now, similar to the driver's seat, if you look, here's my OEM seat connector. The bottom right here has these little curved pins that my new Cinnamon seat does not have. Now, they both have the same exact pin layout. The only difference is that my OEM seat has these little curved pins down here. Now, I assumed that those pins were just for the memory seat function. I could be completely wrong, and if you happen to know, please let me know in the comments. But assuming that was the case, I was willing to toss the seat in anyways, and if I lost the memory seat function, cool. Not a big deal to me. I don't use it anyways. My biggest thing was I didn't want any fault codes. So also, alongside that, I was made aware that you can potentially have a fault code if you swap your seats and don't swap the module over, because I guess the car is coded to the seats, or the seats are coded to the car, so the car knows, you know, if you swap the seat or not. And to avoid that potential fault code, again, I don't even know if that's a thing, but I wouldn't put it past BMW. What I ended up doing is taking the module out of both my Cinnamon seat as well as my black seat, and then I just swapped them over. And the reason I was able to do that is when I had them both out, all I did was compare the pin setup, and they were exactly the same. So I figured I could just toss it in and the car wouldn't know any better. And sure enough, once I had it in there, I luckily have no faults, and all of the movement functions work, minus me having yet tested the memory seat function. So all of that to say, if you are planning on doing a front seat swap in probably any newer BMW, just be careful and make sure you buy at least close to similar seats. Both of these seats don't have the massage or the AC function, so I was willing to give it a try. If you buy seats that do have those functions, you may have to code those out so the car doesn't throw any fault codes, but in my instance, luckily I didn't. It was a pretty direct swap, which, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and swap this module onto that seat and then throw the seat in the car and just hope that I don't have any fault codes. So catch you guys when this is installed. All right, so the seat is officially installed. Everything is plugged in, the battery's hooked up, and thankfully, just like the driver's seat, no fault codes at all. I think swapping that module over from my black seat to the new cinnamon seat really helped with not throwing any codes. And so far, all of the functions work. And let me show you guys how it turned out. All right, I think that about wraps it up, you guys. These seats look awesome in here. I'm really stoked with how these turned out. This build is turning out pretty good, man. I'm really stoked with how things are coming. I know so far a lot of this has been interior stuff, and I'm really hoping soon that I can get to some exterior stuff, or at least some stuff under the hood. But if you've been rocking with me so far, I appreciate it. Hopefully you learned something in this video about front seat swaps, at least in the F10. Hopefully you could avoid any fault codes or issues with your swap if you decide to do it. But I think for now that about wraps it up. I appreciate you guys checking it out, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.